What is up, Brad fans? Thank you so much for being here. Today, Brad and Brad are back in the saddle and answering a listener question submitted to us via Instagram. So, the question involves the new variants of coronavirus and pertains to the need for travel restrictions in the face of these new variants. So, we break down what is going on with the new variants, why they're of concern, where they might have come from, and then we address our listener question regarding travel. We also discuss an Ebola update. That's right. Some Ebola research, some Ebola news. No, there is no new outbreak, but there's a bit of research regarding survivors of Ebola. And this actually may have some kind of a link to potentially to COVID and the long haul COVID sufferers. So stick around for that. And finally, we touch on, again, sustainable space travel. Last episode, we talked about wooden satellites. And today, we're talking about biofueled rockets. All right, so a little bit of everything in here today. Thank you so much for being here. And of course, if you want your question answered, reach out to us at 2brad4you on Twitter or Instagram. You can also leave us a voice message and we will play it on the show and respond. Speakpipe.com. Speakpipe.com/2brad4you. And of course, you can find all of this information on our website, 2brad4you.wordpress.com. As always, rate us, subscribe, comment wherever you're getting your podcasts, and that really helps us out. And yeah, we'll read through the comments and see what we can do about answering any positive and or negative feedback you may have. As always, thank you so much for listening. Here we go. The latest episode, 2brad4you.
Okay, hello listeners. Here we are on this momentous day. Flash, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Doing real good. How are you?
I'm not too bad. So it's momentous, listeners, for several reasons. So we're recording this on the infamous Groundhog Day, which I know a lot of us feel, having been in lockdown, 3 times here in the UK and other places even more severe than that. Every day does feel a little bit like Groundhog Day, but it's a mix of news depending on which groundhog you follow. I didn't realise until tonight, Flash, there are several groundhogs. You've enlightened me there that even Canada has its own series of groundhogs. But the main groundhog, the one that is world famous thanks to the Bill Murray movie of Groundhog Day, Pox to Tony Phil, he saw his shadow. So he is saying we've got 6 more weeks of winter. So, Flash's verdict was that we should shoot the groundhog and then we don't have to worry about this stupid idea. But I say protect the groundhog. We can get through this. We're locked down. It's not as if we're going out anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, really, if it's going to see a shadow one year, this is the year, right? Why
exactly.
not? I'm not doing anything else, so yeah. There we go.
So momentous for that day. It's also momentous because it's the first show we've recorded while using our own show mugs.
Ooh.
Well, yeah, they're more exciting than that, Flash.
Ooh.
There we go. You really should invest in that special effects department. Watch online, listeners. We may be doing a short production run to put into our online shop. But more importantly than that, Flash has taken it on almost all by himself to increase the listenership of this podcast. Flash has sired an heir apparent. So
heir to the podcast kingdom. That's right.
Indeed. So
yes.
Congratulations to you on your newest arrival, Flash, and obviously to your lovely wife, Teresa.
Thank you very much.
I can't hear screams in the background, so you're obviously doing something right.
Yeah, soundproof the room pretty good. Not the podcast room, his room. He lives in a soundproof little cage that we just keep him in there, and when he looks cute enough, then we take him out to hang out.
Raise the true Canadian way.
Yeah, exactly. In a snowbank. Frozen. It's great. Henrik is here. He doesn't listen to the podcast yet, but he will.
Do you just have it playing in the background like you do with a puppy? You just have the radio playing when you feel at home. You just have the podcast. You would hear Dad's voice and go, ooh.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I figure there's a little too much cursing on the show for him right now, but we'll get him into it soon. He may make an appearance. at some point, and who knows? Yeah, but
So
as of
basically, you're trying to do me out of a job. You're basically siring a co-host. Is that what you're telling
yeah,
me?
I got to get him into the podcast, and I got to get him into playing music so we can jam together. There's so many things that I need to force onto my child. I figure that's what you do, right? Like you just
Yeah,
force hobbies onto them, and then they
yeah,
end up loving them just as
yeah,
much as you
definitely,
do. Yeah, so
definitely.
that's the
Yeah,
plan.
and force them into science. None of this arty farty stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's my lovely wife Teresa. I think that's one of her concerns is that he's going to grow up to be a drama kid. A
And then
weird
yeah,
emotional drama kid
a
in a
scientist
house of
just don't know what to do with
scientists.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. We'll be at a loss. But no, he's good. She's good. Yeah, we couldn't be happier. So yeah, thank you. And
good one.
we'll see. I mean, we use the same internet connection, so he's not increasing our download numbers at the moment. But you know,
Hey, I'm sure you'll find a way around it soon enough. So, but also in other momentous days, and I just remembered this now. We didn't touch about this. 33 years ago today, the Wonder Years. Remember that TV show?
I sure do. Yeah.
It was 33 years ago today that it premiered,
Oh, interesting.
and apparently changed the way that we watch TV forever. That, according to Joss Savino, who was playing one of the main lead characters. But
Yeah, he's a little biased there, huh? Yeah.
yeah, maybe he's still getting rich off the rerun money. Who knows? But yeah, 33 years ago today, that kind of made me feel a little bit old.
Yeah, to be honest, I was never a big fan. It was one
Do
of
you
those
know,
shows came on, and I was always like, "This is boring," and this kid's whiny. Like, I don't get it. But
and I couldn't see what the attraction with Winnie was, to be honest.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But
Well, not for
you know,
me. Okay,
it
let me
filled a
do
gap.
you one as well. Spontaneous news: Screech from Saved by the Bell is dead.
Yes, saw
Interesting.
that.
Did not have him in my celebrity death pool for 2021, so I missed out
Wow.
on that one. Um, and given his like recent headlines, recent in the last couple of years of his antics, activities, lifestyle, I did not expect his death to be from natural causes, cancer, a natural cause. When I saw the headline, I was like, oh shit, this is going to be good. But no, sadly, it was cancer.
You were expecting him to get shanked in a prison or something, were
So,
you? Is that?
something a little more exciting. I mean, this makes me sound really callous, and
It does a little bit, Flash, but I don't want to turn the listeners against you. But I came up
it's
with a heartwarming story of Poxitony Phil and the Wonder Years, and you're coming with Death and Pestilence. But
yeah, yeah, and that the
all for
death
you.
wasn't exciting enough for me.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's move on for that. Yes,
yeah.
I
Let's do
I
that
am
quickly.
involved in a
Yeah.
celebrity death pool. Yes, yes. I picked the
It's
queen.
more
To be honest,
well,
what? That's a good bet.
really. But how many years have you been betting on the Queen?
Pretty much every year for the last five
Yeah,
years.
and how's that working for you?
This is the one. This is the one. I
Yeah.
should have picked Philip because he's a little older. But yeah, I think my pick for like a more off the board younger one was Mel Gibson. Yeah, was inspired. Teresa helped me with that pick.
I really do think I don't know. Maybe a couple of years
Ah,
back when he went off the rails, but he seems to be
you never know. You never know.
well. But the thing is, now if he does, then our 7 listeners will be hunting you down, basically to shop you into authorities, because there surely will be a link if he goes under this year.
Yeah, especially if it's suspicious.
Yeah, who knows? Well,
Anyway,
watch the space, listeners. There's your prediction for this year.
moving
Well, on that
on.
cheery note, where do we go from there? I know. Why don't we talk about a global pandemic?
That's right. Well, and I mean, okay, cheery note. We got a listener question about
Woo!
the variants, the UK variants. And before we get to the question, why don't we do a little wrap up, a little recap of what is going on with the variants? We've heard a lot about these. Obviously, it's a bit concerning, but what do we know? What do we know at the moment? What are we concerned about? And it appears to me, from what I've dug up, is that there's 3 variants that are of concern. And what's concerning is that the virus appears to be mutating in the S protein, the spike protein, which, as we have all learned by now, is the protein that helps it attach to human cells and get into...
We're all virologists nowadays. It's amazing, isn't it?
We all know what the spike protein is. And so changes to that apparatus on the virus obviously can have effects on how well it binds to our cells, how well it can get into our cells, and it can also have effects on how much of the virus is shed by a infected person. So basically, in the right combination, the right mutations, it can increase transmissibility. So it can make it more contagious, which appears to be the case with the three strains, these three new strains that we're seeing. But also the concern is this spike protein is where a lot of what's called neutralizing antibodies. So it's a type of antibody, one of many antibodies that your body produces that latch on to this protein, and they kind of block it. Like they just, their mere presence there prevents it from binding to your cells and things like that. That's where a lot of these neutralizing antibodies bind, is this S protein. So if there's changes there and the neutralizing antibodies can't bind, that's going to obviously, again, affect the way your immune system can handle it. But it's also going to be could be a problem for vaccines, because that's one of the things that the vaccine will do is boost your antibody response, right? So, but if it's boosting this antibody response that no longer fits onto this spike protein, then we could lose vaccine efficiency. So how does this happen? How do we get these variants? Obviously, mutation, evolution, the virus is changing. But it seems to be that there's a specific situation that's hypothesized to create this process. I mean, there's of course random mutation. Every time the virus replicates, it can mutate. It can just make an error and change one of its base pairs, and then that will create a new type of virus, new strain, if you want to call it that. And then that may be beneficial or maybe not. So that's just normal. Mutations happen in genetics.
Exactly, and the beneficial one then propagates more, and the less beneficial.
So you have that. Yeah. You have that, but then you the selection process. You need, when there is a selection pressure, it can actually eliminate the ones that don't fit this new environment, and the ones that do fit the new environment propagate even faster, even further. And so that's where they think that this situation is arising from, is in hosts, certain hosts. So certain people have a limited, not immunity, but their immune system is able to limit the replication of the virus, but not completely eliminate it. Right. So the virus can stick around, and in the presence of this like sort of weak kind of half-ass immune response, it's getting exposed to an immune response. So it's getting challenged, but it's not getting completely eliminated. So there's always another generation of virus that can then adapt to this immune pressure
and be immune to the immune pressure. Yeah,
right, exactly. So it's like it's almost like a training. It's got weights on that it's excuse me, that it's constantly training with. Whereas like if the weight was just too heavy and you couldn't lift it, then game over, you're done. Yeah. But by having just a small amount of weight, just a small amount of pressure, it's training and training and training and getting stronger. So that's where they think this is coming from, is potentially there's these people among us that just their immune system isn't quite able to eliminate it, but it keeps it around. So they have the disease for a long time. And excuse me.
He's coming down with the virus. If he starts coughing and he gets a fever, I'm disconnecting Flash, just so you know.
Yeah, well, we got 5G now.
Virus coming down the line.
We got 5G connection now too, so I'm going to shoot that virus right through to you.
Well, there you go. You see, I don't have 5G. I'm not showing any symptoms. You have 5G. You've developed a cough.
Oh, there we go. No, I just took a swig of beer, so we should be okay. So anyway, so that's how they think it's happened. That's where these mutations are occurring. And right now there are 3 variants that are of concern. There's one from the UK.
You're welcome.
One that originated in South Africa, and one in Brazil. So the Brazil one is pretty new. We know very little about it, but it appears to be similar to the South African one. So side note here, I found it very rich that there was a bunch of people, political, what do you want to, pundits, whatever, that were at the beginning when Donald Trump was calling it the Wuhan flu and the China virus. They were all like, yeah, that's totally fine. We should totally do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Fuck China. They did this to us. And then when people started saying, oh, well, we have a UK strain, you could, of course, see these people on Twitter all of a sudden clutching their pearls, being like, whoa, don't call it the UK strain. Whoa, that's a little much. So I think we should refer to it as Flu-K, the Flu-K strain.
Oh, I see what you've done there.
Yeah,
did that take you all day to come up with that?
It did not. I stole it from a friend on WhatsApp.
Well done. Well done.
So I can't remember exactly who it was in the group chat. It was one of my friends named Andrew. There's a couple of them in there. So I can't remember which one of you guys did it, but good job.
You've got more than one friend?
Surprisingly.
Wow.
I mean, I see them on WhatsApp, so I don't know. It could be the same person just doing multiple personalities.
Some other person's WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing. Okay. Fair enough.
Anyway, so Flu-K. We got Flu-K, South Africa, and Brazil.
So the other 2 variants don't get a funny name?
If you can come up with one, or you have a friend that can come up with one, and then you
Well, I
can
was
steal
gonna
it,
say, yeah.
then yes, by all means. Yeah, so the UK one, it kind of got like a lot of press right at the beginning, and there was a lot of travel restrictions and stuff, and we'll get to that because that's what the listener question pertains to. But it has some changes of note that appear to make it more contagious. It increases transmission, but fortunately, it looks like the changes don't affect the effectiveness of the neutralizing antibodies. So when they take serum samples from people who have been vaccinated and test it against the antibodies in that serum against the new strain, it appears to work. So there shouldn't be a problem with vaccines there. Now, the South African one has a few more changes than the Flu-K strain, and these changes are close to what's part of the spike protein, a part known as the receptor binding domain. So that's a little concerning because it's a very important part in terms of binding to the host cell. So obviously that can have impacts on how well it attaches. It's also a known binding site for the neutralizing antibodies. And there's changes in another location called the N terminal, but whatever, doesn't matter. It's just a part that's important. And also a known antibody landing spot. So this is a bit more, the South African one is actually a bit more concerning in terms of vaccine effectiveness. It appears also to be more contagious, but this one is a bit more, like I said, concerning for the vaccines. And there is evidence that there is reduced antibody binding efficiency to this strain for the antibodies that are induced by the mRNA vaccine. So that's Moderna and Pfizer. Yeah, so the two that have sort of been in the news and the first ones to come out. It looks like, again, using these serum samples and stuff like that, sort of lab tests, not tested in the field. We haven't seen evidence of it in people that have been vaccinated, but it looks like that the antibody response that is mounted by the vaccine isn't going to work very well against this strain. But we don't know if this will affect overall vaccine efficiency because the mRNA vaccines also stimulate T cell responses. So the immune system is way too complicated for us to try and dissect. I don't even fully understand it, but there's tons of different cells that are involved. Antibodies, T cells.
You've either got your B cells, which are antibodies, and you've got your T cells, which is a different type of immune response.
Yeah. So the mRNA vaccines, they also stimulate this T cell response, which will protect you as well. And it elicits apparently a quite strong neutralizing antibody response. So even if some of them don't bind to all of the places on the spike protein, there still might be enough to sort of compensate for that, but we just don't know. Not enough data. Well, it remains to be seen what happens to people that are vaccinated, and if we see that the vaccine isn't working. And then the other vaccines, we just don't. Yeah, who knows? We'll see. So some of the vaccines that were developed and tested in China and now in India, they don't appear to create such a robust neutralizing antibody response. So they might be screwed. And then we just don't know anything about the Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, Sputnik.
Well, there was some data published on the Sputnik one today, basically.
Oh, they actually released some data. How nice.
Yeah, well, there's a journal article in The Lancet, actually, where, and I'm just trying to get to it before I misquote the numbers. 92% protection it showed in phase 3 trials. It's just been published in The Lancet.
That's the Russian one that was approved before they did these trials. So thankfully, there is some data that backs up their approval. But anyway.
Yeah, but as you said, it works. The Sputnik vaccine works in a similar way to the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine and the Janssen vaccine, where it's working, taking a cold type virus, and then that's engineered to be harmless, and then it's got small fragments of the coronavirus there to generate the immune response.
Yeah.
So that's the, as you said, that's the interesting one, because that's the more traditional vaccine design. So yes, the newer vaccine designs like the Moderna and the Pfizer BioNTech ones are, as you said, you're getting this dual immune response, which is a bit stronger, but potentially they take longer to engineer. Whereas actually what they're saying is actually the more traditional vaccine response, although it's probably more focused in terms of how it generates that immune response, you can actually re-engineer it quite quickly if you needed to update it. So should the mutations keep coming, you could, in theory, a bit like the flu jab every year, it's the same base virus, and then you can just add in whatever that mutation is for that year to try and counteract it.
Yeah, well, and I mean, this actually, like the mRNA ones as well, should be very quick to adapt to new variants as well, because you just need the messenger RNA. You just need to sequence the new variant and then flip it in. So that is like sort of the nice thing, is that some of these vaccine technologies that we have should be able to adapt quickly. It's just a matter of, it's still going to take, we say quickly, it's still 6 months, 9 months, whatever it is. Yeah. So, by the time, if these things are running rampant, we could just push this thing back another 6 months, 9 months, 10 months, whatever. So that's kind of the skinny on the variants. Also, the monoclonal antibody treatment. This is one of the things that Trump got that apparently made him feel like a superhuman. They might not work as well against the new variants. So, but we just don't know. So I got a lot of this from an article in, it's called, what's the journal? JAMA, the JAMA network. It's like Journal of American Medical Association or something like that. So really nice review of the current situation that was written. And they offered some, what we should be doing in the face of these variants. So basically characterizing blood and serum from the people that have been fully vaccinated to kind of see if these viruses are resistant to the vaccine, and travel. Stopping the spread of, they didn't specifically mention travel, but stopping the spread should be a big thing that we're doing. Because we got to let the vaccines catch up, and we just don't know how well the vaccines are going to do. And this leads us to our listener question that was brought to us from Instagram. And here, I'll just read the question. Questions for the Brads. I can see why you would close borders in light of a concerning new variant, but taking that to its logical conclusion, doesn't that mean you concentrate a new strain to a specific location, and over time, it becomes an increasingly different mutation? The end game would then become multiple different epidemics requiring different vaccines rather than a pandemic. The analogy being that at the moment we are playing a gigantic game of whack-a-mole. So thank you for the question, Defenderist on Instagram. Shout out.
Well, and then the second part of that is, then potentially you're going to be playing whack-a-mole with a layer of rock, paper, scissors to play with on top of each mole. So,
right.
So it is a really good question, and I loved calling it pre-production. Flash and I basically have a chat over a beer before we start recording about generally life. We sort of talked around this in general. We both came at it from different ways, but ended up in the same place. And I think obviously there's always a short answer to everything, isn't there? There's always a long answer, and we'll try and find somewhere in the middle so that we don't bore the listeners. So I think, and you said it before, Flash, I think part of it's politics. I think that's part of it. I think, if you're shutting the border, you're seen to be a strong politician. You're doing
something against the scary new variant. Yeah,
exactly. But unless you're on an island, shutting the border doesn't naturally work because there's still some crossage over there.
Even on an island in today's world, travel bans do not, it's not going to protect you. It's going to buy you some time, but it's not going to protect you. And you have to think too that by the time this thing was noticed, by the time we even noticed the new variant, you have no idea how far it's spread. It's not like just because you noticed it, that's the first one. That's another thing I think that doesn't get sort of communicated and can get people confused. Like, oh, there's a new variant, we found it. It's like, yeah, you found it, but it could have been there for, months, weeks, days, who knows? And this is a good point. I think I'll just jump in here and say that the UK has a really robust system of sequencing a lot of the COVID samples. Because if you just do a normal COVID test, PCR test or an antibody test or something that you get from the doctor to say, like, I've got my COVID test, I'm negative.
I'm positive or not.
Yeah. That's not going to tell you if it's a new variant or not. It's just going to tell you it's COVID. So in order to find these new variants, you actually have to sequence the genome of the virus and see these changes. And so the UK actually has probably one of the best in the world systems for sequencing all of the samples that come in. And so they detected the variant. But other places can't do that or don't do that. So we don't know where it is.
That's the thing, and in the UK, I think they're only sequencing like 5%. So it's a sample that they're taking, which just shows the number of cases. Fortunately, there's a lot. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, there's a large number of cases coming through. So that 5% is obviously testing a large number, but potentially that just shows them all right there. And today in the news, it's shown that it was thought that the South African variant wasn't here, but now that seems to be pocketed. And I think where it gets really interesting is, like, the South African virus that's here is being seen in a pocket along the south of the UK into the southwest. So it's obviously come in from somewhere, probably somebody asymptomatic at the time, and then it's spread. But it's an interesting one. I guess looking at it, when you speak to people about viruses, I think because people can't see them, they tend to think it's some sort of magic or whatever. But if you want to scale it up, a very good analogy is like the Galapagos Islands and Darwin and evolution. There are species of lizards on the Galapagos Islands that have distant cousins all around the world from where they've spread out, but they mutate into the sequence that they're in. So, yeah, the UK variant has probably come about because, as we talked about earlier, the selection pressure, the immune pressure has forced this new variant to come out. As viruses always do, it's very natural for a virus to mutate and undergo changes because that's what it's trying to do. It's trying to keep itself alive and keep going.
Everything
get better at what it does. Exactly. So it's trying to mutate to be more contagious. Well, how does it do that? It either does that by spreading more rapidly and being easier to get into the host cells, or it does that by evading the immune response. And that's what we've been seeing with these mutations in all three variants, that it's that mutation of evading the immune response that seems to be causing a large part of the increased contagion from this virus.
Right. So then getting back to the question of travel and travel bans and restricting it, and really the question, it comes down to, it's poking at speciation. So they like at what point, like if we isolate this virus, let's game it out, you know. If we were able to, with the caveat that we just discussed that you can't, travel bans will not contain this spread. But let's say you could, and you kept it uh, within the UK, the population of 66 million, right? Uh, how long would it take for that COVID strain to become so different from all of the other COVID strains that it's now a unique thing that requires a new vaccine, and it's sort of a new thing that we kind of have to worry about, not, separately from the rest of the strains? Probably a long time, that it's going to diverge to the point that it's going to be different from all the other ones. The point, see, the reason why you would want to contain it in where it is, or slow the spread, again, we can't contain it, but slow the spread, is that every single host that the virus goes into is an opportunity for it to mutate. So it faces a new environment, a slightly different environment of the immune system. It could be one of these people that has this weak immune response that is a perfect sort of selection ground that we talked about. You can also get mixing. So if the person has one strain of corona and then gets another, the virus can actually like physically like get together and swap genes and stuff, so you can get that. So every single person that a virus encounters, that it goes into, is an opportunity for it to mutate into a more deadly, dangerous, transmissible, whatever strain. So you can have 66 million opportunities for it to do that in the UK, or you could have 7 billion opportunities for it to do that across the world. And that's the skinny. So the chances that you're going to isolate it to a point where it becomes a brand new thing, and then you kind of have to treat it differently, and that's going to cause all these other headaches, is very unlikely. Just in terms of that would, you would need like 15, 20 years, of like really specific evolution happening in one location for that to happen. But people are similar enough all over the world that, even if you kept it in the UK, it's going to face similar, sort of selection pressures and whatnot as it would in South Africa, as it would in Japan, as it would in Canada, which is exactly why you have the UK strain, showing this mutations in the S proteins, and you have the South African strain showing mutations in the S protein. Like it's evolving in the same way all over. So it's not, the concern really isn't keeping it bottled up in one place is going to create some kind of, totally divergent new thing. It's really about giving it less opportunities to encounter people,
Exactly that.
and so you have this new strain that already has sort of a leg up. So why give it more opportunities to get even more of a leg up? So that's really what it is. And like we said, the travel bans aren't going to keep that. You're not going to get 100% on that, but you can slow it down and hopefully get enough people vaccinated that this strain doesn't, take off and become the dominant strain that then, yes, we have to develop a new vaccine for and redistribute to the whole world. So that's how it's an interesting question, because it does like the logic of the question makes sense. And like I said, it's like speciation, right? Like at what point do two things become different species? Like at what point did a tiger become different enough from a lion that we call them different things, right? And it's that boundary is actually very gray. No one really, we kind of have rules for it for mammals and lizards and that's sort of the animals that we know, where it's like, well, can they mate? If they can mate and it makes a viable offspring, then then they're the same species. But even that doesn't work all the time, because you can mate a tiger and a lion, right? But we call them different species. Anyway, but so for viruses and bacteria and the microscopic things, it's much that barrier is much slipperier. So you're not really worried too much about, isolating it to a point where it becomes this new weird thing.
Yeah, and we talked about the mutation. It was a timely question when it got asked by Andy or Slasher, and then very timely today when actually by chance we chose to record because there's actually been a couple of papers we've referred to today that's come out. So the mutation itself that we've seen with the UK, the Brazil, and the South African variant is the E484K mutation. So that's the one that today Public Health England have published to say that we're seeing more cases, but that's the same mutation that we're seeing with the Brazil and South African strain. And as we talked about earlier, what that mutation seems to do in this case is help it evade the immune system. So it's the antibodies that were effective are no longer effective against it. And as we talked about the silver lining, as one scientist put it, was it's a mutation. It's not diverging from each other. So even the UK virus, when you look at that alone and you compare that to the Brazil virus and you compare that to the South African virus, the mutations that they're going through are actually very similar, although they're distinctly different because you're looking at the genome. They're actually similar. It's not at this moment branching off into some totally weird mutation for the UK and some totally weird one for South Africa. So that's why at the moment people are saying, well, actually the vaccine is still having an effect. And it might not be as effective as it was because the part that was generating antibodies for might have mutated, but it will still have an effect. Now, obviously, fast forward that by a year, 6 months, 2 years, then those mutations might overtake so much that actually the current vaccines aren't there. But that's why when you have your flu jab every year, the actual strain that it's based on is updated all the time because that's what you're doing all the time. You're monitoring to see what that strain looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't seem like it, but actually, from what I read today, actually coronaviruses are relatively stable compared to influenza and things like that. So I know, obviously, there's a lot of focus on it, a lot of media time to it, and everyone's panicking because, there's another new variant. But actually, these new variants aren't, in a lot of cases, new. They're the UK one, they're the Brazil, they're the same type of mutation.
Yeah. And I wonder if...
And as we said, it's natural.
Yeah. And I wonder if you could even, it's possible. I don't know how you would ever be able to show this, but it's possible that they all originated from the same place. These mutations could have arisen in each location independently from each other.
Yeah.
Or the UK one could have...
a patient zero.
Yeah, or the UK one could have been first and it made it to South Africa and then acquired a couple other mutations, or maybe it originated in South Africa and then made it to UK and lost some of those mutations, it mutated back into the... you can't... There's no way to determine the direction of these things when you're just sequencing things. There's things that can give you a clue, and you try and piece it together the best you can, but you can't actually say that. So who knows, how it started. But this is exactly, why limiting the amount of people that come into contact with the virus is so important, which gets back to the question of why you just overall want to not spread this new variant around, because again, every single person that it comes into contact with is another chance for it to mutate, is another chance for it to get better. And this is probably why, you say coronaviruses compared to influenza, compared to HIV, compared to these other viruses are very slow mutators. They don't generally diverge quickly and do these different strain things, but just the sheer number of people that have this virus right now is contributing to that's exactly the problem. Yeah.
And that's contributing to the variants. And actually, one of the journals I read today basically said that the vaccination program that's globally rolling out now will actually dilute the impact of these mutations. Obviously, the more people you vaccinate, the more protection you've given that population of people. The vaccine's not there in those people anymore. So you're diminishing the population which the vaccine can survive, and therefore the numbers that it's in, and therefore the number of cycles it's going to go through to be able to mutate are a lot less. So I know it's the cliche that's been, it's on the news all the time here, but the vaccine is the way out of this at the moment. Vaccinate people, keep all the measures of, washing your hands, staying indoors, not coming into contact. You have to break that cycle.
Yeah.
to see the back of it.
Yeah. We just have to reduce the amount of people that have the virus in them.
Exactly.
It's that simple.
It's very easy said, and obviously, you know, scientists are data-driven. Not that I would ever call myself a proper scientist, but actually, there was an article today showing, obviously, Israel have been really proactive with their vaccination
I think
program.
they're up to like 50% of the population. And mind you,
Yeah,
they only
it's
have 4
incredible.
million people, but still.
But actually, what they've shown there, the data that I saw today was actually the data showing that the vaccination is working. So actually, in the over 60s that they've prioritised as their vaccination group, there's a lower infection rate and a lower illness rate.
Beautiful.
And it's distinctly in that group. When you look at the data across all of it, the other age ranges still have high infection rates, but that group in particular is coming down. So yeah, it is working, but you can't just rely on the vaccine alone. To give the vaccine the best chance, you have to be using the social distancing measures, the standard hygiene practices that seem to be the bread and butter of life now.
Yeah. 6 more weeks, at least.
Is that your prediction?
Yeah.
Groundhog Day's predicting a long winter, and coronavirus will be gone 6 weeks. You heard Flash say it here.
Yeah, after 6 weeks, it's going to be gone. It's just going to disappear. The weather's going to get better, blah, blah, blah. I heard that once. I think it was exactly last February that we started to hear that. Yeah.
Well, I think exactly last February is when Trump was saying this won't be an issue.
Yeah. We've been in it for a year, folks. We've been in it for a year. Okay, well, I hope that answered the question. I think we muddled through it as best we could.
Yeah, I think it's as best we could.
If we didn't, get back at us with another angry message, and we will.
I don't want angry messages. I get enough of those already.
Okay. From me? Are you counting just the ones from me, or like you get other ones?
Well, no, I've blocked you, so I don't get those messages.
Yeah, that's why. All right. Okay, let's move on then to more virus-related stories. Our favorite virus.
Is it our favorite virus, you think, still?
I think so. We got an Ebola update. We got an Ebola update, my friend. We got some news from the Ebola world. So yes, my favorite virus. I don't know about you, but I'm gonna say it's the most talked about virus. Even with coronavirus, Ebola might be the most talked about virus on this show.
See, I was going to say, yeah. In general, I don't know, but on this show, I think Ebola takes that crown.
Yeah,
for sure.
So Ebola news. Interesting little study that was just published, came across my news feed, and it will relate to coronavirus, so I'll bring it back around. Just wait for that. But they did a sort of long-term follow-up of Ebola survivors, and found that roughly 200 days after they recovered from Ebola, there was a spike in Ebola antibodies. So we've been talking about these antibodies for a while now. So the antibodies that were designed to attack Ebola, they noticed that they kind of came surging back in the body about 200 days after the people had recovered from Ebola. And that's weird. We don't really know. They don't really know why that is, what's going on with that. But one of the theories, one of the thoughts is that because we know that Ebola can remain in the body in certain places, especially places that the immune system can't get to, the eyes and the testes, the gonads. So in men, the testes, you can get Ebola.
Oh, you are on a roll tonight, Flash.
Right? Again, that's not mine. That's from back in the Where's My Glasses days.
From Andy on WhatsApp, yeah.
That might be a shout out to Johnny from our Where's My Glasses days. But anyway, it persists. So it's possible that, this virus that they've tested different people and found that, there's small traces of virus in these locations in the body that persist. I think there was some concern about sexually transmitted Ebola because, it was remaining in the testes. And I think they even found it in semen samples from some men after they had recovered, like 45 days, 50 days after they had recovered. So could it be that this virus starts replicating again in these different locations, and you might not pick it up on a test? And that was the thing, they didn't see virus when they tested people, so they saw the antibody spike, but then they tested for the virus and they couldn't find it. So it's like,
Right.
and then when I say test, I think it's just sort of the general test that you would do if you wanted to go in and find it in the eye, find it in the balls, find it, like you would have to do more intensive testing. But yeah, so it's interesting. It's a weird little quirk, but we know also that there is post-Ebola syndrome. So there's a certain amount of people that have symptoms, headache, muscle ache, fatigue, like very distinct symptoms after they recover from Ebola. And it lasts for a long time, and we don't really know why. And this points
It's
to
a bit like the long COVID syndrome that, yeah.
bing, bing, bing. That's the connection. But yeah, so we don't know. They don't know why, but this points to a mechanism. There could be something going on, and if we're seeing that antibody spike in the Ebola patients, that maybe it's this latent virus. Who knows? It also has different treatment repercussions. Maybe they're speculating maybe we need to vaccinate people even after they recovered to sort of stop this resurgence or something, or give them some kind of a booster or something like this. But there was no evidence of transmission in these people, so they didn't catch it again. There wasn't that, and I believe they don't think that anyone was spreading it again. But I don't know. So
okay, so they were seeing the antibodies, but as you said, they weren't actually seeing any virus in these.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, yeah, and I've seen with the long COVID syndrome, they're thinking that is more of almost an autoimmune response or a byproduct of the immune system. So actually, the body's fought this off so severely that it's done some damage to itself. Or, I guess, interesting in this case, is it the circulating antibodies that are causing that issue?
Yeah, and so that's the thing, and that is the link now to coronavirus. Is that and this is speculation alert. This is just me,
We really need to get some sound effects officially made, don't we? We just press a speculation.
Maybe that's the clip that will be dropped in from now on. Speculation alert. Speculation alert. I read earlier later last year about SARS being found in all of these different places in the body, eyes and balls being one of them. I think I made a crass joke in one earlier podcast. I might have been doing it just by myself about SAS, severe acute sac syndrome. So, so there's we know that SARS-2 can persist in these different locations in the body. They found it in different locations. Part of that is, it has the right receptor that the virus binds to and things like that. But we don't know what that means. We don't know what that, you can't say that that's causing long haul COVID or anything like that. But it's interesting to see that in Ebola, you get this antibody spike, something you could look for in SARS patients as well, in COVID patients as well, see if that's a similar feature. Just a really interesting avenue of research. Not much we can say about it other than, whoa, that's weird. We should look into that.
But that's how these things start, isn't it? You spot something weird like that, and then it takes you down a rabbit hole that maybe leads you to something, a discovery. But yeah, it'd be interesting that you talked about, do we vaccinate these people that have had the disease? Because a lot of the time, we say, oh, if you have the disease, you don't need the vaccine.
Yeah.
But actually, is it, in those people, would it be like giving, with most vaccines, you're giving 2 or 3 shots to boost the immune system and give that durational effect? So actually, in these people, do you say, well, actually, by giving that vaccine, that effectively is like giving them the booster shot if you'd have given them the vaccine in the first place?
Yeah.
Will they then get prolonged immunity or the ability to clear what's left of that infection out?
Or, like you said, it could be, like you said earlier, it could be an overactive immune response, like an autoimmune thing, and getting a vaccine would not be good because you could be
Exposing,
pumping that up.
You could trigger that even more.
Yeah. And that's the thing that they just don't know when it comes to the long haul of like post-Ebola syndrome, post-COVID syndrome, whatever you want to call it. Is it this latent virus that's kicking around? Don't know. Antibody spike kind of leans, maybe it's that. But it could just be an overactive immune response in general. And Ebola is known to cause that. It's definitely one of the features of when you're dealing with Ebola, you get these cytokine storms and things like this where the immune system just goes, oh, fuck, and just throws everything at it. So you get this, and, that causes a lot of damage. And there's evidence that, SARS, some of the damage that's happening in the body is also the immune system trying to deal with it. So, yeah, who knows? But it's an interesting thing. And I saw the link there. So I thought, why not speculate?
Well, and why not have some Ebola news? Because we hadn't any for a little while.
It's true.
We've been too taken over with other viruses, so it's good to see Ebola coming back up the league table.
I didn't want it to get I didn't want Ebola to feel like we weren't paying attention anymore and that it felt like it needed to do something. So I was like, hey, we still love you. Just stay where you are and not do anything.
You're getting into the parenting thing already, Flash, aren't you? Looking after the firstborn child that was Ebola. Well, let's switch gear a little bit. We've done a lot on biology and a lot on viruses, and you and I both love a little bit of physics, a little bit of engineering. So why don't we wrap up with a little bit of a feel-good story? Rockets. We all love rockets. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about steam rockets, with Mad Mike in the past. Rest his soul. We've talked about SpaceX's Starship and their new engine technology and booster technology. But Stardust, that is the future. So what's Stardust? Stardust is the name given to a project by Blue Shift Aerospace to their project, which this week saw the first commercial launch of a bio-derived fueled rocket. So a biofueled rocket, ladies and gents.
So what are we talking, like corn, ethanol, super concentrated enough to get enough thrust and propulsion?
It's moonshine.
It's basically moonshine,
no,
yeah.
It's not. So they're being very cagey around what it is. Obviously, it's their secret. What they have said is it could be sourced from farms around the world. Is the base
manure?
Of it. So we don't know. Well, that's it. Is it a manure-based product? Is it a plant-based product?
Yeah.
Is it a vegan rocket? We don't know.
Yeah.
But basically, this company called Blue Shift Aerospace, they've firstly refined the fuel and then secondly developed the engine.
You would need a special engine, yeah.
Of course.
So we had a little Henrik interruption.
No, not at all. We had a bit of a Wi-Fi interruption, so it all worked out well. So Stardust. So the rocket launched this week, Stardust, it's 6 meters long. It will have the ability to carry a payload of about 250 kilos, so not a huge amount, but it means it's relatively cheap to launch. So that would make it more open to students and researchers to be able to jump on board with doing research in space, because you're not then having to, pay for a whole Starship X or, one of the major...
Yeah, one of the big guys, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And what I really liked was their analogy. So they said that SpaceX basically are aiming to be like the bus service into space. You'd be able to take passengers or payloads up, whereas Stardust plans to be the Uber into space, so on more of a smaller individual level. So,
I was going to say like the e-scooter, like...
Yeah, well,
yeah.
So the launch that happened this week went 1 mile up. So they've got another launch scheduled, which will then go suborbitally, and then later this year they're planning a launch that they're calling Red Dwarf. And the plan is that would enter a polar orbit. So rather than an equatorial orbit, this will actually be a polar orbit.
So rather, around the belly of the Earth it will go.
Yeah, which is actually takes more fuel or more power to do, because you don't get the velocity of the Earth to help you with that slingshot.
The rotation, okay.
But what it does is it gives you more ability to see over landmass. So actually these launches are happening in Maine. in the US. And they say that's one of the sites actually for a polar orbit that would be beneficial. So actually, they're making use of an old Air Force base that used to be there in the Cold War, ready for the B-52 bombers. So they're actually saying that this potentially could revolutionize the aerospace industry, create hundreds of jobs, and revitalize lots of sites like that, where you could have these rockets going up relatively cheaply, cleanly, taking payloads or research up into space. And the other piece that I only briefly caught on to the end was actually the first lot of experiments that either went up or is going up, is looking at the material that's created that they make stents for heart attacks and things like that. So it's quite a shapeable material. So they're looking at the influence on space travel on this material to potentially then make rockets out of that in the future, because it's light and malleable. So yeah, just something a bit different. I thought, we talked about wooden satellites in the past, so why not talk about biofueled rockets? So, maybe we should start stockpiling all our poop, Flash, and we can look through it for worms to tick the parasitology field, and then power it into rockets, and off we go.
I'm really curious what the fuel is. Obviously, like you said, it's proprietary. They're not going to just give that secret away. But what could burn hot enough to put 250 kilos into space? It's got to be shit, right? It's got to be shit.
But yeah, I've had a few morning afters the night before, maybe a few beers, a couple of curries, and the next day I'm like, you set a match to this, I could be launched into space. Well, now potentially we could be. So, stock up on your spicy foods, your curries, your takeaways.
You got to stock up on the spicy foods, the curries, the beers, the takeaways. But then you also have to, collect your own shit.
Well, yeah, and you also have to develop the engine.
Well, no. We sell our shit to them. They already have the engine,
Okay. Literally selling rocket fuel.
That's right. But yes, we've had a few internet disruptions, baby disruptions so far. So shall we, Brad, wrap it up?
Let's wrap it up. So thank you, listeners. Thank you to our newest listener, Henrik, who actually even, briefly maybe started on the show. Maybe we can splice in some of his words of wisdom. If you want to get in touch with the show, then you can do so on Twitter at 2BradForYou. You can hit me up, Brad directly, at Bradley W. Hayes on Twitter. Flash, if they want to get hold of you.
The usual, at bvampiredon on Twitter, Instagram. The show has an email.
And also, I was going to say the show has an email and the new voicemail capability.
That's right.
As well, correct?
I'm just making sure I have that address correct, but it should be speakpipe.com/2bradforyou. You can go to the website, our website, 2bradforyou.wordpress.com, and find a link there. You can also find a link or you can also find the email address there, which is 2bradforyou@gmail.com. But yeah, there's many, many ways for people to get in touch, and I really hope that people do. If you leave us a voice message and it doesn't, suck, then we'll play it on the show.
And then, you could be part of this madness. And as we said, keep your eyes out soon, as we'll be trading our wares, potential mugs, hitting the global store.
Mug sale.
So, mugs for mugs.
Yeah. Leave us a message, get a mug. There's so many opportunities here.
Indeed. There are, yeah. Who knows? Flash, as always, it's been emotional. It's been a roller coaster. Thank you. Apologies for my Wi-Fi being crap. But mostly thank you to the listeners. So,
yes.
Stay strong, stay safe, and catch you all soon. Is it still Poxitony Phil, or do you have your own groundhog?
Huh?
Do you have your own groundhog in Canada, or do you all go by Poxitony Phil?
No, we have our own. Everywhere has their
like
own.
That.
Yeah, of course.
We don't have groundhogs here.
No? Well, they're fucking everywhere in Canada.